Hi everyone, and welcome back. Now the question is, why do we wake up during the night? Well, cortisol, the stress hormone, also called the wake-up hormone, and melatonin, the sleep signal hormone, works in opposite directions from each other. Anytime there is an increase in the cortisol hormone for any reason, it automatically shuts down the melatonin production, and we wake up. And then we stay awake until the cortisol reduces past a point where the melatonin production can continue and we can drift off to sleep again. When we can't get back to sleep, it's because for some reason the cortisol is still elevated because our stress response has been activated and the melatonin has been turned off. Now, poor sleep predictably creates an increase in our blood pressure, breathing rate, heartbeat, etc. Why? Again, our stress response is activated, and these things are a natural part of this process. That little stress response keeps coming back time and time again. Now, poor sleep can be a clear sign of nutrient deficiency, in particular calcium, magnesium, vitamin B complex, vitamin D3, potassium, and omega-3 oils. Now, these things are really important because they are crucial elements required for the calming of our brain nerve connections. Calm brain nerve connections allow us to sleep. Many studies show that around 80% of any population, including ours, would be very low or deficient in these elements, and especially in our older generations, and for specific reasons, which especially includes folk in retirement homes. Which begs the question, how do your levels rate? It's very important to know this. Now, long-term poor sleep means our stress response is continually activated, which means that over time, we can run short of the chemicals stored in our body necessary to make those specific stress hormones. Those chemicals would come from the food that we eat in a balanced diet. When stressed, we stop eating a balanced diet. It's just naturally what we do as we go into the sweet commercial processed stuff. Now, running short of any of these things creates an extremely stressful response as our body works to get our attention to remedy the problem. Just for interest, it appears that anybody who is in a long-term stressed environment for any reason will be deficient or extremely low in many of the vital minerals, vitamins, enzymes, and even natural fats. Now that will create or add to the intensity of the stress response and the level of the stress that any of us can experience. Poor sleep can also be a clear sign of nutrient toxicity. Now, a common one is good old glucose, which comes from eating too much sugar and wheat grain and flour products, especially in our evening meals. And why do we do that in our evening meals? We do it simply from habit. Yep, yummy dessert and after dinner snacks, etc. And our body has to get rid of that glucose out of our blood system immediately because that rush of sweet stuff spikes our blood glucose to a toxic level well above what it's normally geared for. And now we are wired as our body works hard to clear it, along with an increase in insulin. Our body temperature, our heartbeat, our pulse rate, our blood pressure, and we just take it all for granted and repeat the same food routine the following evening because it feels good and tastes yummy. And it's what we do. Ironically, it is a similar response on the inside as when we get a bee sting on the outside. But we can see the bee sting and it hurts. Anyway, a few hours later we go to bed and try to sleep with all of this going on, but we have now interfered with our human natural sleep process and the train has left the station. Having a late meal also means the processing of it overlaps with the timing of our first sleep stage, remember, which can only happen when we are sound asleep, and we can miss that completely. And then, after a certain hour, our body clock turns down the food digestion process for the night. So we end up trying to sleep and stay asleep on a full and bloated belly that is slowly fermenting, for goodness sake. Now, to make it worse, when we get to sleep, we simply don't have surplus oxygen in our body or available because we are not awake and active like during the daytime. Therefore, any surplus oxygen is needed to clear the digestive system, which is now operating at nighttime slow speed, really slowly. And that surplus oxygen comes from our whole body, including our brain. The problem is our brain never sleeps. It needs all the oxygen. A brain lacking oxygen is classed as a threat by our ancient reptilian brain. Yeah, there we go again. And the stress response cranks up to wake us up to fix the problem. And we wake up every time. And now that can make for a very long night. Then there is alcohol, coffee, chocolate, and ice cream. Yum! But we deserve some treats, right? Well, maybe we do, but unfortunately, the chemicals that make up these goodies in particular not only prevent the production of the sleep hormone melatonin, but block the receiving points on every cell in our body for the melatonin, which is meant to tell our body it is time the sleep process began. So it doesn't happen. Now, unfortunately, alcohol is also a sedative, and even one small glassful mildly sedates our brain, which is now preventing the nightly non-rapid eye movement stage of immunity and healing, etc., from being activated. But even more, in the second half of the sleep process, the alcohol interferes with the rapid eye movement stage from doing its job of filing away our emotions and memories. We know this because often after drinking alcohol, images and emotions swirl around and around our mind as crazy, unsettling dreams and noticeably a very disturbed sleep. And the rapid eye movement stage is a very light sleep stage, so it is easily interfered with. Now, unfortunately, but alcohol is a common major problem if you feel stressed and depressed and are using it as an evening pressure relief system. Short term, it seems to be great, but long term, we need more and more to get the same effect because we are under long-term stress and pressure until it becomes what we do to relieve and even avoid this immediate sense of life pressure. And then we can have poor sleep and then feel groggy and hungover the next day and anxious and depressed. Okay, that'll do us for today. Food for thought, I hope. Now, if you have any questions on the subject, no matter how silly you may think they are, then just message me or leave a question in the comments section. Okay, nice job everyone. I'll catch you later. Bye bye.